All right. Hey guys. Thanks for jumping into webinar number 6, which is in the series. Just a quick thing. If any of you have missed any of the previous webinars, they're all available on the knowledge base. One thing that I really recommend if you've missed one and you want to catch up, you can actually, sort of a sweet trick is to actually watch these things on 1.25 speed. You'll probably find you can still follow along pretty well, and you can save yourself, about 15 minutes out of every hour webinar. So it's something I use when I'm watching webinars. I just accelerate them on YouTube. So to do that, just click the little gear icon and change the speed from normal up to 1.25. And I find that it's still pretty understandable. And you just get through the content a lot quicker. So yeah, we've got one more after this one. So today's is all about the warehouse management system charging. So I've got a little box here that you can see, which I'll be running through and ticking off as we go through. We've then got another webinar running next week, which is all about the transport management system charging. So the key thing today is that we're going to be going into a few details all around the warehouse management system and how the charges work. There's quite a lot of detail in there, which we glossed over in yesterday's webinar. We sort of just quickly moved through some of the key things that you needed to know to construct a rate card. But today it's really about digging into some of the detail and explaining, I guess, some of the more deeply nested functionality that we have within Card and Cloud to handle all the different kinds of different charging that people require. Okay. So I just want to show you on our knowledge base, if you search for charges, and you jump into the section on charging, we've actually got the different sections broken down. So yesterday I went into a few of the articles which are in this section here on customer charges. Today I'm going to actually be digging into quite a bit of the content which is within this warehouse charges page. So different things to do with complicated handling charges or really sort of nuance things inside storage charges and exactly how that works. So coming back to Card and Cloud and looking at the account that we created over the last few webinars, what I've done is I've connected up our client Salmon Distributors to a customer charge card, which I've called Salmon Distributors. So in yesterday's webinar, we had them connected to a rate card called 2018 rates. However, I've swapped it out for the Salmon Distributors one. And what we're going to do is go through the Salmon Distributors customer charge and go into details about some of the more specific charges within that. So I'm just going to go across to customer charges. I'm going to jump into the Salmon Distributors card. Okay, now it's got a few of the basics that I set up yesterday, like the sale order charge, how much we charge for just a per order fee, the urgent order charge, which I explained yesterday, and that's to do with processing orders that come in after a certain cutoff time that people have to have packed and sent immediately. They don't want to wait for it to be packed the following day. Now, outbound SKU charge is an interesting one. This is one that we get a few queries about. What an outbound SKU charge is it's a way to charge a fee for each different SKU that you pick. So I'll explain where this comes from. When you're picking in a warehouse, if somebody says to go and pick 100 boxes of one product, it's generally much faster to do that than it is to go and pick one box of 100 products. And the reason for that is that every time you switch product, you're generally needing to switch location. Whereas if you're just picking 100 boxes of a single product, you can typically go to one location and then just grab everything off that location and build out whatever's going out. So what we implemented was a way in which you can charge a fee every time you switch SKUs. So if your order contains, say, 5 different product lines, then you can have it charge based on picking an outbound SKU fee of, say, 10 cents, then it would charge 5 times 10 cents. The other one we have in here is a minimum SKU charge. So this is basically a minimum charge that can be applied to that SKU, the SKU picking rates. So if in the previous example, I'd set the minimum SKU charge at $1.20, then it would look at it and it would go, okay, I'm only charging 50 cents for jumping between SKUs. That's less than my minimum. I want to raise that up. I'm going to just go into the edit screen here because I want to provide you with a bit more information around these different picking charge options. And I'm going to use a combination of both the information on Card and Cloud and also the information in our knowledge base to explain it. The picking charge option stuff is, it might seem a little complicated at first, but once you get your head around what's actually going on, you start to see that you can actually do some pretty cool stuff with charging using this effectively. So when you're dealing with picking rates, there's really two different things that you can configure. The first thing is that you can configure, obviously, the price per pick. So you can have different rates for picking boxes or different rates for picking cartons and units. And then you can start to have sliding scales and things like that in there as well to say, if I'm packing more than 10 boxes, I want to charge it at a lower rate. Card and Cloud automatically calculates how many units or cartons or pallets or whatever it is that you're picking should be charged for. So the other configuration option that you have is the way in which it calculates what it is that you actually picked. So you've got an option to choose how many different things you picked, and then you've got an option to configure the different rates that you charge for those things that were picked. So there's 4 different options here. There's default, charge base unit of measures, intelligently charge pallet picks, and charge pallet picking per location. If I jump across to the knowledge base, what I'm going to do in here is go into this flexible handling charges screen. I think it's, no, it's not that one. It's, I believe it's warehouse handling charges and stock selection. Okay. Under the sale order handling fee algorithms, we've got an example of each of these 4. And I'm going to go into them in a little bit of detail because it really helps if you know what you're doing when you set this up. So the default scale to highest unit of measure is pretty common. What that means is that if you've got a product which is, say, you sell it in bottles and you can pick it in bottles, but you can also fit, say, 6 bottles inside a carton, then if a client goes and orders an order for, say, 12 bottles, the system will automatically scale that to 2 cartons and it will charge them for 2 cartons worth of picking. So that's in the option where you have this scale to highest unit of measure, where it tries to figure out, okay, what's the biggest unit of measure I can use for these picks. If someone had ordered, say, 13 bottles, what it would do is it would charge for 2 cartons and 1 bottle pick. So they'd get 2 charges. They'd get 1 for picking the 2 cartons and 1 for picking the single bottle. In this example here, we've put in some examples. So we're trying to show what happens when you are picking these different items and exactly how the system's going to calculate. So if you're ever needing to really understand this in detail, my recommendation is to come back to this page and actually have a quick look down the different situations that we've got loaded here and have a look at how these 4 different options which are listed across the top would charge these. Okay, so the next one is charge base unit of measures. What this does is, if in the same situation you were asked to go and pick 12 bottles, it would just charge it in the base unit of measure, which in your case would be bottles, because that's the smallest sellable unit. So the handling fees would be for 12 bottles. They'd get charged 12 times whatever your bottle handling fee is. It would never convert upwards to a carton. If your product was only measured in cartons, then of course it would charge a carton fee, a carton rate for that. It can't charge anything less. The next one, where you intelligently charge pallet picks where possible. Now, this one's quite cool. So say that you have a location and it contains, let's say it contains 45 bottles, which is, what is that? 6, 8, 48, just 7 point something boxes on this one pallet location. Now, if you have pallet picking rates loaded into the system, then you might find that if you were to move that whole pallet, it would actually be charged out at a cheaper rate than if you were to charge individual picking fees for each of those cartons and the additional units that are on that location. So what Card and Cloud does when it's using this intelligently charge pallet picks option is that it says, okay, if I'm picking from this location, when I pick from this location, will there be anything left afterwards? And if the answer is no, the location is going to be empty, then it knows that you can just physically move the whole pallet and not do any additional work. If it knows that there's going to be stock left over on that location, once you pick everything that you need for your order, then it knows a full pallet pick's not possible, because you're going to be pulling out the pallet potentially and then taking stuff off of that pallet and putting it back on the location. So as a result, it won't do it. But if it realizes that it is possible to charge a pallet pick, then what it does is it looks at, what would I charge if I were to charge for the individual carton and unit picks? And what would I charge for a pallet pick? And if a pallet pick is cheaper, then it will charge for the pallet pick. It also gets a little bit even cooler than that. When you've got, say, multiple products on a single location, and all of those different products are all added to one sales order, the system will look at, okay, across this whole sales order, if I pack everything that's on it, am I going to be taking this location and emptying it completely? And so then what can happen is, rather than charging carton picks for one product and unit picks for another product and carton picks for a third product that are all on that one spot, it takes into account all of those being in that one location and realizes, no, I can just charge a pallet pick for that whole location. And so it goes ahead and charges that. It's a pretty cool and automated way of really charging in what I consider to be quite a fair way of charging picking fees. My personal opinion is that if you can physically do the work of just moving a pallet, then I don't feel that it's right to charge for individual carton and unit picks. I realize that this would vary across different businesses in terms of how they operate, and there may be other factors at play which mean that they need to charge carton and pick fees. But we designed this specifically because we found that some companies were really wanting to charge based on the physical action that they were performing, rather than just the quantities of what was being picked. The last option, which is charge pallet picking per location, this is a really simplistic method where you ignore anything to do with units and cartons and conversions, and you just look at how many locations am I going to, and then it charges a pallet pick for every single location that you go to. So it's a pretty straightforward and easy method for charging. Okay, so coming back to this edit customer charge, when you're building up your customer charges, you need to specify which of those 4 methods you want to use. So when you're building up your rate card, you might have, for a particular customer, you always want to do this intelligent charging. And then for another customer's rate card, you might say, we only want to do the default charging. So in this example, I'm just going to choose intelligently charge pallet picks where possible. Going back up just to talk about the same things on the purchase order side. With purchase orders, we have only 2 of those options. So we just have the default option where it scales the quantities up. If you're putting away 12 bottles, again, it converts it. It knows you're putting away 2 cartons. And so it would charge for a 2 carton put away fee. If you choose to charge base unit of measures, then it would just charge based on those 12 bottles individually, and it would charge 12 times the bottle put away fee. So we don't have those intelligent and per location fees available on the purchase order side as of yet. It's something that we may implement into the software, but we really haven't had any requests to add that in from anybody. Okay, another one I'm going to discuss on purchase orders, the purchase order charge is straightforward. It's just like the sale order charge, it's a per order fee. The inbound invoice upload charge, this is not commonly used, but what you can do with purchase orders is that you can actually upload documents against them. So you can upload, say, any material that came in physically with the goods, and these could be, pieces of paper which are, they might be customs clearance documents, they might be Aquis information, other information like this. You can charge your clients a fee for having uploaded that into the system. Again, it's not commonly used. It's something that we implemented at Roving Logistics because we had a particular client who always wanted us to import, anywhere from 5 to 10 pages against every single purchase order that arrived, because they needed a copy of that information for their own internal records. And so we billed them, I'm not sure what it was, it might have been $2, say, to load all that stuff in and save it against the purchase order. So you've got that option there. Urgent purchase order fees. As discussed in the customer charges webinar, again, you can mark a purchase order urgent. If it's urgent, then it would apply an additional fee for having processed it in the same day. And minimum charges are blanket charges that just raise how much you're going to charge as a minimum across the whole order. Okay, so those are all I really wanted to discuss on the purchase order and sale order sort of standard options that come under this details tab. What I want to run into now is I just want to jump into the handling charges and just run you through a few of the specifics within those. So I've cleared everything out of this customer charge. There's no rates preloaded. So I'm going to go through and actually add some in. So clicking on add handling charge. The first thing you need to do is select what the charge is applying to. So what unit of measure. If I'm applying, say, unit charges, I click on unit. Down under here, we've got a couple of different options. So text field basically just means that it's a rate per unit. So if I put in here 40 cents, then that would mean for every inbound unit, if the other logic that I've already talked about calculates that I need to charge a unit put-away fee, then it will charge 40 cents per put-away. I'm going to jump over timer. It's not actually used within the warehousing system as of yet, and jump to sliding scale. Sliding scale is, it allows you to specify basically banded rates for these things. So if I say from 1 to 10, from the first 10 units that I'm putting away, I want to charge 50 cents. And this is an option here. Do I want to charge it per, or do I want to charge a flat rate? So I might say for a flat rate, I want to charge $10 for putting away the first 10 units. But say I want to do 50 cents per unit. I can load that in, and then I can say, okay, from 10 up to 20, I only want to charge a lower fee. So I want to charge 40 cents. From 20 to infinity, I want to charge 30 cents. This is a really commonly used method of charging purchase orders, because it means that the higher the volume which is coming in, the less you actually want to charge per item which is being put away. And it's exactly the same down here. We've got, so what I was just working on was what we call inbound charges. So these are to do with purchase orders. Down here, we've got exactly the same question for outbound charges. How do you want to charge it? Is it a text field? Is it a sliding scale? If I want to do a sliding scale on outbound, I can do exactly the same thing. If I want to charge the same rates on both incoming and outgoing, literally just copy and paste the data into a table down here and save that. Okay. So I'm going to save this. I'm just going to make it that on outbound, it's just a standard fee of I'll say 40 cents per unit going out. I'm going to add another one for cartons, because I know that we're going to have some carton picking fees a bit later on. I'm going to say that inbound, I want to charge 30 cents, and outbound, I want to charge 45 cents, and adding those in. Going across to an actual sales order, I want to explain where these various rates actually show up. So when you're going through and packing a sales order, at the end of the packing process, Carton Cloud calculates how many of these different items to charge. So I've gone into a sales order here and I've gone to the charges tab. It's calculated that for this order, I've got no units that need to be charged, but I've got one carton that needs to be charged out at 45 cents. So that's where this information gets displayed. At any time, if I decide that what it's calculated using those algorithms I talked about is incorrect, you can just come in here and change them. So if I decide, no, I actually want to charge for 5 cartons, not 1, and I want to charge for 2 units, then you can just literally change it and click save. And that updates the pricing that you're billing out for those different picks. This happens sometimes where you might have it set to charge based on scale it to the highest unit of measure. And then in actual fact, you're picking, say, a whole pallet less one box. And so the company might decide, well, actually, rather than charging them for 63 cartons to be picked, we're going to charge them a pallet picking fee and a carton picking fee, because we pulled the whole pallet out. So that's a pallet move. And then we put one carton back on the location. And that would be an example where it's something that you need to manually update in here, because Carton Cloud can't really know that that's how you did it. It can just do its best to calculate based on the way that you've told it to calculate. So you do have the options always to come in here and override those. And then that works. I'm just going to show you one other thing as well. To do that, I quickly need to delete my existing invoice that I have left over from the customer charges webinar yesterday. So I'm just going to delete this invoice. To delete an invoice, you have to have it in draft status. So I'm just converting that back to draft. And now I can delete this out of the system. So I'll get rid of that. When you delete an invoice, anything which was being invoiced under that invoice basically just goes back into not yet invoiced status, and then will attach itself to the next invoice that you create. So we've done that as a safety mechanism to prevent you from ever ending up with jobs that aren't invoiced. So if I go back to my sales order now, previously it was saying that it was attached to invoice 2. If I refresh this page, it's now going to show me that it's not yet assigned to an invoice. And if I was to go and run some automated invoicing, it would pick up the sales order and attach it to an invoice in the future. So some people, they make a few mistakes here. They say, oh, I don't want to bill for this job. So they go and remove it from an invoice. They take the job, say it's a sales order, physically off the invoice. And then the next week when invoicing comes through and runs again automatically, that same job reappears on the invoice. And often they go, oh, I don't know why this keeps on showing up every single week. I don't want to charge it. In this case, what you actually need to do is you still need to invoice that job, but you invoice it out at a $0 price. So within a particular sales order, you can come in there and you can literally just say, I want to manually add a charge. I want to make it $0, not charging, put an income of 0. And then down here, it says existing charges, select those that you want to remove. So if I select all of these, that's basically saying get rid of them when I click save. I click save. All of those charges have been removed, and all I'm left with is just a single fee of nothing. And now I can go and actually attach this sales order to an invoice, and it will be billed out at $0. One other thing that happens when you add a sales order or a purchase order or a consignment or any other billable item to an invoice is that it tries to calculate the price at that time. Now, if you've got something like this where you've manually added a charge to it of $0, when I try and attach this to an invoice, what's going to happen is it's going to come in and say, oh, okay, there's a manually added charge here. I don't actually know how to proceed because I'm trying to calculate my own rates, but I see that there's something manually added. So what would happen in that circumstance is that it would actually create a charge error. So I'll show you that now really quickly so you can see the process. If I go into my invoices and I create an invoice for salmon distributors, create that invoice, come across the sales orders, add a sale order, and select these 2 sales orders that I've got, which have been dispatched. Add those to the invoice. One of these will create a charge error, and that's my $0 invoice. So if I jump into this and click view, within here under charges, I've got an error. So it's got an income error saying existing charges contain manually added charges. I'm unsure how to proceed. So basically, when it tried to calculate all the prices, it saw that I'd added this $0 charge, and it said, well, I need to stop here because if I go and automatically add charges to this, I might be doing the wrong thing. To get around this, what you can do is before you go and invoice the job, or straight after you have actually added this $0 charge, there's an option up here to mark the charges as finalized. So if you click that button and say, I want to mark these charges finalized, now when this invoice or when the sales order gets added to an invoice, it's going to say, oh, this thing already has finalized charges. I can just ignore it. And it won't try to recalculate any rates across this invoice. And so therefore it won't create a charge error. Now, this is really important when you're doing a lot of invoicing at high volume. You obviously, you may have a whole bunch of jobs that you don't want to charge, or you have a whole bunch of jobs which have odd manually added charges to them. And what you don't want to have happen is that when you create those invoices automatically, by default, they're going to throw up a whole ton of charge errors, and you're going to have to work through each one and manually fix it and manually load it to 0 and manually email it to the client. So as a result, you do want to use this mark charges finalized when you've completed your manual charging and you don't want it to throw an error later. And that's a really important sort of, I guess, speed hack going forward, where you don't want to be doing manual work you don't need to. And I'll just show you an example of that. So if I go back into that invoice, which I just created, and I remove that invoice, that sales order from the invoice. So I highlight it here and click remove, take it off the invoice, and then add it back in. Sorry, hold on, let me remove this. And I also need to clear what's called the charge error on this particular sales order. So if you've got a charge error on something and you say, well, no, actually I've dealt with everything, what you have to do is you have to tell it to clear the charge error. So this means I've dealt with it. Don't tell me that I've got a problem here anymore. So I click this button, clear. That removes the charge error. When I now add this sales order to the invoice, you'll see that because those things are finalized, this will just add on and it won't have any problems. So it's gone through successfully. It's charged out $0 and everything's worked. Okay, so we've covered off a few things there. We've covered off the charges being finalized. We've covered off how to manually add charges, and it's exactly the same across sale orders, purchase orders, storage periods, consignments, etc. It's all designed to look and work exactly the same. The next thing that I want to go on to is to talk a little bit about the ad hoc charges. So I've gone through the overview. We've actually covered off the handling charges, and I'm going to go into the ad hoc charges. Going into the customer charges, if I go into a particular client's rate card, so Salmon Distributors, we've got this tab here, ad hoc charges. Now, I ran through this briefly, so I apologize if this is repeated material from the customer charges webinar, but ad hoc charges, you declare them as sort of, you create them overall in the entire system, and then within each client's rate card, you can turn them on and off or modify the pricing. So if I want to add a new ad hoc charge, I go up to the top, type in ad hoc, it brings up the ad hoc charges. If I want to add one to sales orders, I make sure I'm on the sales order tab, and then I click add new charge. And say that I want to add in a new charge for, what's an option? Relabeling drums. I'll just put that in there. I'm going to charge it, my typical fee that I'd normally charge across the whole company, I'm going to write that in here as $3 per drum that I relabel. Down here where it says, where do you want to show this charge? This is really critical. So there's two different places this can be displayed. One of them is what we call the sale order view page. So that means that when you're looking at a sales order, and I'll just jump back into the actual sales order itself, if I turn that on, that ad hoc charge will show down in this section here. If I turn that off, if I say don't show it there, it will not show in this section, so you won't be able to see it. This is useful when you have a really large number of ad hoc charges and you only want to turn some of them on for certain customers and you don't want all of them to show all the time. Then you can make them not appear here. The other place where these can appear is on the sale order pack list page. So if you're packing a sales order, and I've got one here that hasn't yet been packed, so I'll start packing that. When you're packing a sales order, it's the same on the mobile app, you have these fields appear down here. Now, these fields appear, or the ad hoc charge fields appear in this section if you have the sale order pack list page turned on. So if I leave that off, they won't show up here and they'll only show up in the actual view screen. If you want to put them in as part of your workflow when you're going through and packing out a sales order and sending it, and you want the picker and packer to record how many of something that they did for billing purposes, you need to make sure that you've got this option, sale order pack list page, turned on so it shows up on that screen. So if I save this now, click save, I've created my ad hoc charge. Back on this screen, if I refresh this, I should be able to see that third thing, which is relabeling drums. So that now shows up on there as well. Back in ad hoc charges, we've got obviously sales orders, purchase orders, consignments, and also run sheets can have ad hoc charges applied to them as well. One of the things in here that I didn't go into just when I was working on it was this section here called the description template. Now, we're working on making this automatically populate, but for now, what you can do is you can actually take an example description template from one of the ad hoc charges that was created in the system earlier, such as this. So if I copy this and I just go back to my other screen and paste it in, I'm just going to briefly explain what this does. So by putting this in here, when the charge is displayed on the invoice or on the actual sales order itself down the bottom where it lists out all the individual charges, it's going to populate these little tags here, so that the percent followed by something, percent sign, is like a tag that gets replaced. And this is how it will display the charge to the user so that they can actually see what they were charged for. So this example here, it's going to say price calculated as, and then it says the charge quantity. So it's going to take however many relabeling drums I did. So 3 times the price, how much for each of them. So $3. So 3 times $3 equals, and then it's going to put in there the total charge. If I wanted to do something in here, like add in some additional information, you can do that. You can literally just say, you can add in whatever text you want on the end of this, save it, and then that template will be used for filling out the textual description of those charges going forward. So that's a way that you can customize how that stuff looks. So I'm just going to save that in there. I want it to just display as the default. Okay, cool. I'm going to run into now storage charging, because it's a similar size topic to handling charges. There's a few different options that you can run into. So I'll just bring up our list. We can now say that we've done the ad hoc charges, and the next is storage charges. Okay, cool. So coming back to customer charges, going into Salmon Distributors rate card. Down the bottom here, the first thing that you want to always make sure of is that you're charging storage for the right number of days. 7 days means that you charge weekly storage. So all of your rates that you're putting into the system are how much you charge per week. If you want to drop this to daily storage, you change the number of storage days to 1, and then you can load in all your rates as a per day storage. And some people like to do this because day to day, their storage volumes change so much that if they try and charge a weekly fee, their clients reject it and say, well, the pallet was only there for 1 day. So that's why we support daily storage. Something which I discussed in the customer charges talk, but I'm going to just run through it again really quickly, is this charge product type option, how you charge for say products which are of a different type, or the locations of a different type. I'm just going to run through 2 different examples. One of the examples I used yesterday, and another one which is a new one. So the example I ran yesterday was you have ambient, chilled, and frozen stock. And in your warehouse, you have ambient, chilled, and frozen locations, areas in which you can put the stock. Say that you run out of space in your ambient area and you have to start putting your ambient stock into chilled locations. Generally, the clients are going to really not be happy if you start to charge them chilled rates for storing ambient stock. They're going to say, I don't know what you're doing. You should be charging me ambient rates because this stock's all room temperature. If that's the case, then how you would select in this option is that you want to charge based on the product type. So ambient, chilled, or frozen, from the product itself and not the warehouse location. Another example where you would use the other option, you'd charge based on the warehouse location itself, is when you're, say, storing in both inside and outside locations. Now, we've got a few clients who do storage inside, and they charge, let's say they charge $3 per pallet per week for storing it inside because it's out of the weather. They also have outside locations, basically just a bulk area and a car park. When they store there, they charge, say, $2 per location. The thing is that with the products that they store, a single product can actually be stored in either of those locations depending on what the client wants. So they may have drums of a product and 50 of them are stored inside and 50 of them are stored outside, and they need to charge different storage rates depending on where they're stored. In that example there, you need to charge your storage based on the product type of the warehouse location. And the reason for that is that you've only got one product. So that one product only has one type, which would be, say, ambient. But your locations can have 2 types. They can have a type which is inside and a type which is outside. And then they can also be set up to allow storage of ambient products in both of those locations. And that way, you can build them inside and outside storage at different rates. This one here, double charge storage, it's a little bit of a confusing thing, but it's really critical. And this comes up quite often when we're setting up people on the system. The way that this was designed is that if you imagine a warehouse and you have a particular warehouse location, now during that week, let's say that that warehouse location goes empty, so all the stock is removed from it, and then more stock comes in and goes into that location so it becomes full again. Well, most people would say if you ask most warehouses, how would you charge that? They'd say, oh, well, we charge that location twice, because within that week, it's technically a different pallet of stock that came in. And so as a result, it shouldn't be up to us in terms of charging less if we put it in a different place. We should charge the same if we put it over in an empty location that hadn't been used that week as if we put it into a location that was already used earlier in the week. Okay, that's great. So that's a pretty clean example. And then you ask the question of, okay, so what happens if that location has one box left on it, and then you go and add a whole nother pallet of stock into that location, and it's the same product, so you just take that one box and put it on top of that pallet. And normally here it gets a bit messy. They start to say, oh, well, yeah, technically we would actually charge that location again as well, because if you think about it, we could have put that pallet of new stock into a different location, and then we would have charged for both locations. Okay, cool. So what we have in the system is this option called double charge storage. And basically that means that if a location had stock in it when it began the week, and then during the week, additional stock comes into that location, should it charge that location again? So if you choose yes here, then it will charge that location again. If you choose no, then basically it will say this particular location within my warehouse has already been charged to this client. I'm not going to charge it again. And that's a really important distinction. That option there, I'm going to go straight from there into the storage charges because it leads on to an important setting which are in the storage charges. So if I jump back out of here, go to my storage charges and add in a rate, if I'm loading in general charges, down here we have this option called max number of new charges per location. So to follow on from what I was just talking about, the location goes empty, more stock comes in. Let's say that one location has pallets go in and out of it 10 times in a week. You've got a really high moving product, a really fast moving product, sorry. You charge weekly storage. You don't have enough space in your warehouse to put each pallet that comes in into a new spot every single time. So you've got locations which have a pallet come in and go out and come in and go out and come in and go out. The question then becomes, well, how many times in 1 week is it acceptable to charge that location? So at Roving, for example, we would say 1. We actually said that within a week, we would charge it once for stock that was already there. If it went empty and more stock came in, then we would charge it again, but we would stop there. We wouldn't charge it 3 or 4 or 5 times if stock kept on coming in and going out. If you don't want to charge, if you want to say limit it at 3, put in 3. If you don't want to limit it, then you want to charge for every single one of those times that stock comes in and out, you leave it blank. And then basically it's just going to go, okay, well, within this week, we had stock arrive into this location 5 times. We're going to charge stock into this location 5 times. Keep in mind that this, when you're charging storage, it tracks stock which is being moved from an existing location into a new location very differently to stock which is coming in on a purchase order. And so as a result, if you move stock around your warehouse, say that you consolidate stock together, you take it from 2 locations and put it on 1 location, that will not charge additional storage for moving that stock onto that new location. It won't charge both of those locations because, to be honest, that's wrong. When new stock is coming into the system, Carding Cloud detects that, and so it knows, okay, this is new stock coming in, therefore it's considered a new pallet, therefore we should charge what we call new charges per location. The other charges are called existing charges. All right, so I'm going to leave this. I'm going to leave this at 1. I'm going to say I only want to charge this location 1 time for new stock coming in during a week. And jumping back up to here to the different storage charge methods, I'm going to go into a bit of detail here as well. So we've got 4 options: per location, volume-based, weight-based, and per pallet. Now, per location is the most commonly used method within the system. This basically just looks at across the entire warehouse, which locations have stock in them, how many of those locations are there, and then it adds all that up and it bills for those locations that are in use. When you have multiple products on a single location, it will only charge that location once. So some warehousing systems actually prevent you from putting multiple different SKUs onto a single location. We allow it, and it's because it's actually commonly used in sort of the SME sector in which we operate. If you've got 2 different products on 1 location, they'll be charged once. They won't be charged multiple times. If you're doing things like volume based, then you need to have your volume information loaded into your products. So when you're creating products, there's actually a field there to enter in the cubic for the product. So if you put in this particular product is, I don't know, it's say 0.3 of a square meter, 0.3 of a cubic meter, then how that works is it takes everything which is in the warehouse, adds it all together, and then bills per cubic meter that's stored in your warehouse. This is really good if you're dealing with, say, block stacked products, or you're dealing with products that they're not sort of typical picking and packing products, things like sand or logs. If you're dealing with those kinds of things, you might charge them based on a volume basis as opposed to a per location basis, because location doesn't really make sense when you're dealing with such large items. Weight-based is exactly the same as volume-based. It just uses a different metric. So when you're creating your products, you've got an option for volume and you've got an option for weight. And provided they're filled out, the system can use those to calculate the storage charges. Per pallet, based on quantity, is an interesting one. This is something which has come up sort of in the last 12 months for us, whereby it's different to per location in that what it does is it looks at, say that you've got like one box of a product in this location and another box of the same product in another location, and then a third box or maybe 5 more boxes of the same product in a location way down the other end of your warehouse. Under a per location situation, you would actually charge them for 3 different locations for storing that product, even though, yes, you could combine them all onto a pallet and just charge them for one area because they would all fit. You've got them scattered out so much that you're charging them quite an elevated rate. Per pallet based on quantity, what that does is that actually looks at, okay, based on the conversions in the system from cartons to pallets, how many of these, if I add up all the different items I've got of this into total, so in this example, I've got 5 over here, 1 over here, and 1 over here, so I've got 7 of them in total. It adds all them up and then it says, okay, I've got 7 of these items. How many can I fit in a pallet? And if you've got a conversion loaded to say that there's, I don't know, 64 in a pallet, then it would say, okay, I'm only going to charge a single pallet fee for this product. If you had 150 of these things scattered throughout your warehouse, then it would charge them for 3 pallets because it's 64 plus 64 plus the leftover would still make up a whole pallet. It doesn't charge a partial pallet. It always charges for a full pallet, even if it's only part of a pallet that you're storing. We go into some examples of these in here. So if I look up storage charges in the knowledge base, we've got a section, different ways of calculating storage, and it's got all these different examples in terms of how to use the different storage charges in the system. So you can go in and see how this is going to apply to your, well, depending on which option you want, and reading the descriptions here and understanding how these are going to work, you can make sure that you select the right thing. If you're dealing with per item storage, now that option doesn't appear under the storage charges because you actually configure that on the product itself. That's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you might say, I charge $2 for each of these that I store per week, and you load that information into the actual product. And then from there, it's literally just going to charge $2 per item per week for that. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to build in my storage charges really quick. So I'm going to say for ambient, I charge a per location fee. It's going to be a flat rate of $3. Max number of new charges is 1. Save that. I'm going to add another storage charge for chilled. This one here is a flat rate of $8. Oops. $8. Max number of new charges is 1. If I also want to do some chilled storage on a volume basis, I need to actually load in the rate for volume as well. So if I put in that my per meter cubed rate for general is, let's say it's $15. I load that in here. Now I've now got, my pricing for each of these different methods loaded in. The way in which you actually configure which of these options to use is in the products themselves. So if I go to warehouse and products, and I go into one of my products like the Atlantic salmon, when you're setting up your product, or later on, if I edit it, you actually choose how you want to charge storage for this particular product. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to have at one time some products which are charged on a per location basis, other products which are charged on a weight basis, and other products which are charged on, say, a per item basis, all within the one customer. And then when the storage charges run and they're calculated, it will say, okay, here's all the products which are charged on a per location basis, and it figures out all the location information from there. And then here's all the products which are charged on a volume basis, and then it adds up all the volume in the warehouse and charges those. Here's all the ones which are charged based on quantity, and it does that as well. So it's really configurable. It allows you to have lots of different types of charging running simultaneously within a single customer and invoiced out on a single invoice. Okay, so coming back to our customer charges, we've actually covered off the storage charges. I've run you through the example of inside and outside. What I want to show you real quick is an example where you can end up doing what we call undercharging storage. So I've got a purchase order here. This one for salmon distributors. I'm just going to reset this back to received, and I'm going to go through the verification step and show you an example of where an order would be undercharging storage and how you can get yourself out of that situation. So when you're verifying a purchase order, what we've set up in the system is that it tries to notify you when it thinks you're going to be underbilling storage. For this product here, this Atlantic salmon, right now I've said that there's 61 of these things, which is 0.95 of a pallet going into my single location. If I change this and I actually raise this up to say 200 cartons going into my one location, and I confirm that that's gone in there, then what's actually going to happen is it goes, hey, hold on, you're trying to load 3.13 pallets worth of stock into a single pallet location. We don't think that's right. And so it actually warns me over here and says you're potentially undercharging storage. To charge storage for all 3 pallets, you need to split this into 4 different lines. And to do that, you do a bulk split. So you come up here, more, bulk split. You tell it, how many do I want per pallet? In this case, I want 64. It's told me how many there are. I don't want to split it to any location. I want to leave it empty. Click bulk split, and it will actually handle that breaking down of the, it will break everything into the individual locations. Now, say that you are just importing a whole bunch of stock and chucking it all into a big bulk area. It can become quite frustrating if you have to split this stuff up into tons and tons of different lines. That's something which a lot of people complained about. So we built some logic in there to handle this. So I have a bulk storage location in the system. I'm just trying to check what the name of it is because I can't remember. So I'm going to go to my warehouse locations and just look it up. Bulk locations. I've got an area called chiller floor. So if I come back to here and say chiller floor, cool. When I try to allocate to this, the first thing it's going to do is say, do you want to fragment this into 4 pallets within this area? So it tells me straight away, is that what you want to do? Typically, you would say yes. If I don't do that, if I say, well, actually, I'm going to put my chiller floor in there again. Chiller floor, I'm going to say just create 1 new pallet. So all the stock goes into one space. Coming down to my chiller floor. Again, it's warning me, hey, you're undercharging storage. This needs to be broken up into 4 different lines. Sort of an advanced feature that you can use to get around this is that if when you're setting up this product, Atlantic salmon, which I'll go into now, I can actually tell this product to calculate storage rather than on a per location rate, to charge it based on a quantity. It takes the total quantity, figures out how many pallets there are, and then charges it that way. So if I edit this and change it from per location down to per location and bulk location pallets, which means when I've got lots of stock going into a bulk location, I want it to automatically calculate the number of pallets that's being stored on that row. I can do this. So I change it to that option, click save. Now when I'm doing my verification and allocation, I'll just refresh this page and that error message should have dropped away, because internally now it's going to handle the conversion of charging this out as being 3 pallets there. You can only do this successfully when you've got a product which converts to a pallet rate, so which converts to a per pallet quantity. So if you've got products that you can never convert into a number of pallets, we recommend you never ever use that option, because otherwise what will happen is you'll load a whole bunch of stock into a single location and the system will go and charge it out as one location. And chances are you'll realize sometime in the future and then go, oh, I didn't realize I was undercharging for so long. This has become a huge problem for me. So only ever use this option, per location and bulk location pallets, when you're dealing with products which can be converted to a pallet. Otherwise, just go with per location. Okay, so that's really cool. Just to give you one more example now, if I actually go in my purchase order, if I try and allocate multiple different things to a single location. So I've got some stock here, which is in AA0102, and in here as well, AA0102. So I put them both. Oh, I can't do it with that because it's a frozen product. Let me do it with this one here, AA0102. When I try and complete the verification on this, which I'll do now, okay, I can't show you this example. It's complaining that I've got missing information around the batch numbers and lot numbers, so I'm going to skip this. But one thing that we've designed in the system too is that if you allocate multiple rows of products in a single purchase order into one location, it comes back warning you, hey, are you aware that you've done this? Are you aware that you've put all of this stuff into this one location? It's just telling you to make sure that you're not making a mistake and accidentally putting all these things together and then underbilling storage on those products. So that's some functionality which is in there as well. All right, so that pretty much covers off the storage periods and undercharged storage. We've discussed a little bit about resolving the WMS charge errors, but I'm just going to show you one more example really quickly where we add a sales order to an invoice and we don't have any rates loaded to calculate what's needed. So I'm going to jump into my invoices. And what I'm going to do now, before I actually go ahead and calculate charges on these sale orders, is I'm going to delete some rates that are necessary. So in my, sorry, let me get to the customer charges. I'm going to go into the customer charge for salmon distributors. Under the handling charges, I'm going to delete a couple of these out. So get rid of that and get rid of that as well. On my invoice now, if I actually tell it to go ahead and recalculate the rates for these different sales orders, click that. Straight away, this has flagged an error on the order that I hadn't finalized. So obviously the finalized one, it knows, well, I can't calculate anyway, I'm already done. But the unfinalized one has tried to recalculate its rates, but it's run into a problem whereby it says here, income, the customer is missing outbound pick charges for units. So what that means is that in my rate card, I don't have any handling fees loaded for units. And up here in the top right corner, we've actually given you the option to jump straight in and try and fix it up. So charges have not been loaded for this unit of measure, fix it. So if I click fix it, it brings me into this screen. It's preloaded the word card in. I can then go in and load my rates. I can say, oh, yeah, this is 40 cents, save that. Get rid of that tab again, come back here. I need to fix it for units as well. So I'll jump in, fix up the pricing for units, save that. Okay, that's all completed. If I now go ahead and tell my sales order to recalculate its charges, it knows that all that information is available and it's gone through and successfully done everything. So we've tried to provide as much information as possible when you're dealing with charge errors as to what's going on and how to get around the problem. And that information is always shown in this little section here, in the section here where it says charge errors, and it gives you a description of what the problem is. Okay, so that's resolving charge errors. That's everything we're going to cover in today's webinar on the warehouse management system charging. Again, everything I've discussed, or the complicated parts of what I've discussed, are covered in the knowledge base. If you go to the charging section, so again, charges, click into charges, warehouse charges, everything is described in details here. If you want to know or reference how the warehouse handling fees work, again, you can go there. If you want to understand more details about the storage, jump in there and have a look too. The next webinar is running next week. It's on the 23rd, I believe. It's sort of the same level of detail about the transport management system. With the transport management system, the rating is a little bit more complex with more rules that you can configure. So that's going to be a really important topic for anybody doing transport charges. If anybody has any questions now, I'm going to open it up. So if anyone wants to raise their hand or ask anything, if not, we'll end it there. And thank you very much for jumping on and attending.